There comes a quiet moment in many people's lives after the age of 60 where something begins to shift, not just in the body or the energy levels, but in how others look at you, or perhaps how they stop looking at you altogether. And this subtle shift, this sense of becoming less visible, less desired, or even less valuable in social and romantic settings, can start to settle in like a fog, not all at once, but slowly, over time, until it begins to feel like the world is moving on without you. And that feeling of rejection, whether it's from a partner who no longer shows interest, from a dating scene that feels dismissive, or even from friends and family who assume your needs are less relevant now, is not just painful, it's disorienting. And yet, in the midst of this emotional unraveling, there's something powerful waiting to be reclaimed. Because what many don't realize is that attraction is not reserved for the young or the flawless, but flows from a deeper well: confidence, presence, energy, and the courage to see yourself as worthy and desirable regardless of the age stamped on your birth certificate. And when you've lived 6 decades or more, you carry with you stories, resilience, laughter, heartache, wisdom, and strength that younger generations can't even fathom. And yet somewhere along the way, you may have started to doubt that richness, to assume that attraction fades like youth, when in truth, it only dims when we stop feeding it. And confidence is that fuel, that invisible magnet that draws others toward you, not with physical perfection, but with authenticity, warmth, and self-acceptance. And it doesn't require surgery or expensive clothes or trying to act younger than you are. It requires a deep, internal shift that says, I still matter, I still belong, and I still deserve to feel seen and wanted. And this mindset is not a fantasy or a motivational slogan. It is a skill, a practice, and when you begin to adopt it, everything changes because people feel energy more than they see age. And confidence is the one thing that transcends wrinkles, gray hair, or sagging skin. And often, the first trick to regaining this attraction-boosting confidence is not outward at all. It begins within, with how you speak to yourself in the quiet moments when no one else is watching. Because most people's self-worth after 60 doesn't erode from what others say. It erodes from the unspoken beliefs they carry about themselves. Beliefs picked up from media, from younger family members, from societal messages that subtly suggest their best days are behind them. And these beliefs form a quiet narrative in the background of everyday life, whispering that you're no longer desirable, that your body is too old, that your passions are irrelevant. And these narratives must be challenged intentionally, daily, because if you don't write your story, someone else will. And the truth is, the way you carry yourself, the way you enter a room, the way you look someone in the eye, the way you laugh without apology, these things are more attractive than any wrinkle cream or trendy outfit. And the second confidence trick that reignites attraction is rediscovering the joy of your own body. Because many people after 60 begin to see their physical selves only through the lens of what's changed or what's no longer working. But attraction isn't about being flawless. It's about being embodied, alive, and comfortable in your skin, and whether that means taking up, dancing again, walking barefoot in the grass, doing gentle stretches in the morning, or massaging lotion into your hands while really feeling your own touch. These acts reconnect you with the sensual pleasure of simply being alive, and that sensual connection shines through your eyes, your smile, your posture, and people notice. And while it might seem small, reclaiming this connection with your physicality reminds your brain that you're still here, still worthy of sensation, still vibrant in ways that matter more than the narrow definition of youth sold by magazines. And the third confidence trick is this: seek out beauty and passion on purpose every day, because what makes someone attractive isn't just how they look, but how lit up they are from within, how curious, how enthusiastic, how connected they are to the things that move them. And that can be gardening, painting, playing music, reading poetry, volunteering, cooking new recipes, even learning something online that sparks your brain, because the glow of genuine passion is magnetic. And when you're living a life that excites you in even small ways, you radiate a kind of aliveness that is impossible to fake. And so many people over 60 begin to shrink their lives, thinking smaller, doing less, avoiding the things they once loved out of fear they no longer fit in or that it's too late. But the opposite is true. The more you engage, the more you create, the more attractive you become, and not just to others, but to yourself. And this self-attraction is everything, because the most magnetic people are the ones who like who they are. And that's not arrogance. It's a quiet confidence born from showing up for yourself with joy. And finally, the fourth and perhaps most powerful trick is remembering that attraction isn't always about sex or romance. It's about presence, about how people feel when they're around you. And you can begin to transform your relationships simply by being more present, by really listening, by offering your full attention without distraction. Because in a world of noise, presence is rare, and people are drawn to it like sunlight. And when you combine presence with emotional openness, humor, and kindness, you become someone others want to be around. Not because of your age or appearance, but because of your energy, your grounding, your ability to see and be seen. And what's incredible is that this kind of attractiveness often deepens after 60 because you've lived through enough to know what matters. You've survived heartbreak, joy, growth, and change. And that depth makes you not just interesting, but irresistible in a quiet, powerful way. And as you begin to embrace these confidence tricks, reframing your self-talk, re-inhabiting your body, reigniting your passions, and showing up with presence, you may find that the feeling of rejection begins to fade, not because everyone suddenly changes, but because your own energy changes. And the moment you stop rejecting yourself, the world often begins to respond in kind. And while this journey won't always be easy, it will be worth it, because nothing is more attractive than someone who is alive in themselves, regardless of age. And this is just the beginning. And once you begin to experience even a glimmer of that inner aliveness returning, it starts a ripple effect that touches every part of your life, because confidence, true confidence, is not a performance. It's not something you fake or force. It's a calm knowing that radiates outward because it's rooted inward. And for people over 60 who have spent a lifetime showing up for others, raising children, building careers, surviving loss, giving endlessly while asking for little, this part of life offers a long overdue invitation to finally turn inward and rediscover what makes you feel valuable, desirable, and joyful simply for being yourself. And the beauty of doing this work now is that you're no longer chasing approval in the same way you might have in your younger years, because now it's not about impressing anyone. It's about reclaiming what was always yours but may have gotten buried under layers of responsibility, heartbreak, and the passage of time. And when you touch that part of yourself again, the one that loves to laugh without filtering, that enjoys touch without apology, that remembers what it's like to feel attractive just because you're alive in your body, you begin to soften toward yourself. And that softening is where the magic lies, because rejection no longer pierces the way it used to, not because you've become indifferent, but because you've reconnected to a deeper truth about your own worth that doesn't depend on anyone else's validation. And this shift becomes the soil from which new kinds of attraction can grow, because now you're not seeking connection from a place of lack or loneliness, but from a place of fullness, of offering, of curiosity. And that energy draws people in, not because you're trying to be noticed, but because people are drawn to those who are unapologetically at home in themselves. And while society may try to convince you that your desirability has an expiration date, the reality is far more liberating, because Attraction is not about age. It's about presence, energy, warmth, humor, generosity, and a sense of mystery. And all of those things are entirely within your reach, especially now. Because at this stage of life, you have a depth of experience and emotional intelligence that number 25-year-old can match. And that's deeply attractive when you learn how to embody it. And one of the best ways to do that is by practicing being seen, not for who you used to be or who you think you need to become, but for who you are right now, today in your glorious, imperfect, aging body. And that begins with small moments, like holding eye contact in conversation, standing with your shoulders back instead of hunching to take up less space, smiling at someone in public without needing anything in return, or even daring to flirt a little. Not in the way of chasing or performing, but in the gentle, playful energy of someone who remembers that life is still full of connection and surprise and spark. And these small acts are not about manipulation. They're about choosing to participate again, to lean into life instead of shrinking back. And every time you do, you strengthen the muscle of confidence, and over time, that muscle becomes your baseline, your home, your new way of moving through the world. And the stories you've carried about being invisible, rejected, unworthy begin to lose their grip, not because the world changed, but because you did. And in that shift, people often start responding to you differently too, not because your wrinkles vanished or your gray hair turned brown, but because they feel something coming from you that's real, something that says, I like myself, I'm here, I'm open, I'm still living. And that energy is magnetic, especially in a culture that's so starved for authenticity. Because when you stop apologizing for your age and start celebrating the richness of it, people notice. And this confidence doesn't just help you attract others, it helps you deepen your existing relationships too. Because rejection in later life often doesn't come from strangers, but from the people closest to us, from partners who have stopped touching us, children who no longer make time, friends who drift away, and that kind of rejection can be even more painful because it feels personal, like evidence that we no longer matter. But what if it's not about you being unworthy, but about the world being too busy, too distracted, too untrained in the art of recognizing the deep worth of an older soul? And when you realize that, it becomes your responsibility not to wait for others to see you, but to show them who you are, not through begging or resentment, but by living in a way that commands respect and inspires connection. And that might mean speaking up about your needs and relationships instead of staying silent, setting boundaries instead of accepting neglect, pursuing new friendships instead of mourning old ones that have faded, or even exploring new avenues of intimacy and dating if that part of your life has been dormant. And what's powerful is that when you do these things, you not only invite new forms of love into your life, you begin to love yourself more deeply too. And that kind of self-love isn't just affirmations and bubble baths. It's courage. It's choosing not to settle for emotional crumbs. It's waking up and deciding that you're still a person who deserves joy, laughter, closeness, and yes, even desire. And that decision can change everything, because people can feel when you've decided to love yourself. And they respond to that energy often before they even know why. And suddenly you find yourself being treated with more warmth, more respect, more interest. And while not every encounter will be magical or romantic, the ones that will feel deeply nourishing because they're based on who you truly are, not who you think you're supposed to be. And as this inner confidence deepens, the fear of rejection begins to lose its power, because you've remembered something essential. That rejection is not always a reflection of your worth, but often of someone else's limitations. And even when it hurts, it no longer defines you. And from that place of freedom, you become more open, more resilient, more magnetic, and more fully alive than you've been in years. And once this momentum starts building inside you, It becomes easier to notice how different life feels when you're no longer moving through the world in quiet retreat, but instead stepping into each day with an energy that says, I am still here, I still count, I still matter. Because there's an undeniable shift in the way others perceive someone who holds themselves with even a hint of joyful self-possession. And it's not about being loud or drawing attention for the sake of ego. It's about existing in your body, in your space in a way that says you're not apologizing for who you are anymore. And that confidence changes the quality of your conversations, your interactions in stores, the warmth in your eyes, the boldness in your gestures, and even the stillness of your presence. And people start to respond to that, sometimes subtly, like leaning in closer when you talk, smiling more freely, holding your gaze longer. And you may be surprised by how attraction starts to return, not because you chased it, but because you became the kind of person who draws it in effortlessly by simply being, by being unafraid to take up emotional and energetic space. And this is so important because for too long, older people, especially those past 60, have been taught to shrink themselves, to fade into the background, to feel as if their relevance is fading with each passing year. But the truth is, attraction isn't about youth. It's about vibrancy, and vibrancy is a choice that's available to you at any age when you reconnect with your own vitality. And this vitality doesn't mean high energy or pretending to be younger. It means presence, intention, and connection. And when you nourish your mind with ideas that excite you, when you feed your body with movement that invigorates you, when you speak words that honor yourself, and when you offer your heart in ways that are genuine, people notice something glowing in you, something alive and compelling, and it's worth reminding yourself every single day that the desire to be seen, appreciated, and touched is not something shameful to outgrow. It is human, timeless, and sacred. And if you've been walking through this chapter of life feeling invisible, it's likely not because you lack value, but because the parts of you that radiate warmth, humor, sensuality, and confidence have been tucked away under the heavy coats of grief, routine, or disconnection. And when you begin peeling those layers off, layer by layer, gently, with self-compassion, what you rediscover is that your true self never stopped shining. It only needed space to breathe. And creating that space might look like something as small as dressing in a way that makes you feel expressive again, wearing colors that reflect the mood you want to invite, standing in front of the mirror and truly looking at your face with love instead of judgment, reconnecting with your own touch through self-massage or slow breathing that brings awareness back to the body, and remembering that sensuality does not end when fertility does. It just changes form and can even deepen when pressure and expectation are released. And this brings us to something most people are too shy to talk about after 60. That physical intimacy and romantic connection still matter, and not just in the abstract, but in the tangible, heartbeat-driven sense of longing for touch, companionship, closeness, and yes, attraction. And the most attractive people in any room are rarely the youngest. They're the ones who carry themselves with quiet fire, who know their worth, who laugh without self-consciousness, who offer their presence generously, and who remain curious about others and themselves. And you could be one of those people, not by pretending to be anyone else, but by fully inhabiting who you are now with joy, with permission, and with bold softness. And one beautiful practice that builds this confidence is to become your own mirror, not in narcissism, but in loving awareness, to touch your own skin not with criticism, but with reverence, to move your hips and shoulders as though no one is watching, to reclaim your posture as though the world deserves to see you walk tall again. And in doing so, you teach your nervous system that you're safe to be visible, safe to feel good, safe to receive affection. And as you continue to practice this, your emotional body begins to open again, no longer guarded against rejection, but inviting connection. And when you show up in this way, even people much younger will be drawn to you, not for romance necessarily, but for your light, your warmth, your authenticity, and you'll find that attraction doesn't always look like a dramatic moment of flirtation. It often looks like being invited into deeper conversations, being offered more meaningful eye contact, being trusted with emotional honesty, or simply feeling the respect and admiration of others who are quietly inspired by your resilience and magnetism. And this becomes a beautiful cycle, because the more you embody your own attraction, the more feedback you receive that confirms it. And over time, the wounds of past rejection begin to heal, not because others never failed you, but because you stopped abandoning yourself. And that healing fills in the gaps where self-doubt used to live, replacing them with an inner knowing that cannot be easily shaken. And even if a particular person doesn't reciprocate your feelings or notice your effort, it no longer crushes you, because your sense of desirability isn't hinged on a single outcome. It's woven into the fabric of who you are, and every morning when you rise, you remind yourself that you're not invisible, not to the right people, not to the people who see through the noise of ageism and into the fire of your soul. And as you continue this journey, what begins to surprise you most is not just how others respond differently to you, but how you respond differently to life. Because when you're confident again, you become braver in conversations, more spontaneous in daily interactions, more willing to say yes to invitations, to make the first move, to ask for what you want, and even to enjoy your own company on days when solitude becomes your friend instead of your burden. And this kind of internal shift isn't something that fades quickly. It's a transformation that grows stronger each time you choose presence over withdrawal, truth over silence, curiosity over shame, and that is what makes you attractive in the deepest, most enduring way. And as all of this begins to integrate into your day-to-day existence, you may realize something that was perhaps too quiet to notice before. Rejection after 60 is not always what it seems. Because while the pain may feel personal, the truth is that most rejection stems not from your value diminishing, but from others being too distracted, too wrapped up in their own insecurities, too conditioned by a culture that wrongly teaches us to equate aging with fading. And when you finally begin to reject that lie yourself, when you rise above it with self-respect and a deeper appreciation for the person you are now, something in the universe shifts, and the energy you emit becomes undeniable, not because you're louder or flashier, but because you've become anchored in your truth. And people are magnetized to that grounding, because so few people in this world carry themselves with peace, with presence, with quiet strength. And once you become one of them, you don't have to chase attraction anymore. It begins to find you. And the most beautiful part is that you no longer need it to validate you, because you already know who you are, and that knowing creates room for real, heartfelt connection, whether romantic or not. And that connection nourishes parts of your soul that may have felt neglected for years. And what becomes possible from that place is not just emotional intimacy, but joy. That laughter that bubbles up when you're truly at ease. That soft gaze you share with someone when neither of you is trying to impress. That warmth you feel in your chest when someone reaches for your hand, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely enjoy your presence. And you begin to see that attraction after 60 is less about the fireworks and more about the gentle warmth of a long-burning fire. One that doesn't demand attention, but is impossible to ignore. And whether or not a new relationship blossoms, whether or not a partner rediscovers your spark, whether or not the world starts to treat you differently, you have changed. And that change becomes the seed for everything else. And when you walk through your day with your chin just a bit higher, when you smile at someone in the mirror without flinching, when you touch your own arm with care and feel not shame but pride, You are performing a quiet revolution, and those around you feel it even if they can't name it. And slowly, subtly, the doors that once felt closed begin to crack open again because you've stopped standing outside waiting to be let in. You've realized you were the key all along. And this inner shift doesn't just improve your relationships, it redefines your identity. Because attraction isn't just about drawing others in, it's about drawing yourself forward into the next chapter of your life where you're no longer looking back at who you were, but standing boldly in who you are becoming. And perhaps the greatest realization of all is this: you never truly lost your attractiveness. It was only hidden beneath the weight of cultural messages, outdated beliefs, and emotional scars that had not yet been healed. And now that you are doing that healing daily, tenderly, courageously, you're uncovering not only your magnetism, but your aliveness. And that aliveness becomes the pulse that drives everything forward, whether it's reconnecting with a longtime partner, attracting new friendships, trying something daring for the first time in years, or simply sitting with yourself in quiet contentment and knowing that you are enough, just as you are. And this journey you're on is not about perfection or chasing youth. It's about radiance, the kind of radiance that only someone who has lived through decades of life can carry. And this radiance does not fade with age. It sharpens, deepens, becomes more nuanced, more honest, and more powerful. And those 4 confidence tricks you've begun to practice: speaking kindly to yourself, re-inhabiting your body with love, reigniting your curiosity and passions, and offering your presence with intention. Those are not just tools, they are portals into a new relationship with life, one where you're not merely surviving the years, but savoring them. And it is in that savoring where others begin to take notice, where connection returns, where desire is awakened, and where rejection begins to feel like a temporary moment instead of a permanent sentence. And yes, there may still be days when old wounds resurface, when the mirror feels unkind, when loneliness creeps in. But now you know what to do with those days. Now you have the tools to meet yourself with gentleness and move through the shadows without giving up on your light. And if there's one thing you take from this conversation, let it be this: you're not invisible, you're not irrelevant, you're not done growing, and you're certainly not done loving or being loved. And even if the world hasn't always reflected your beauty back to you, that does not mean it wasn't there. It only means it's time for you to reflect it to yourself. And once you begin doing that, the rest will follow in time, because people are drawn to authenticity, to resilience, to joy, to depth. And you are the embodiment of all those things, not in spite of your age, but because of it. And if you keep showing up for yourself day after day, choosing compassion over criticism, confidence over shame, and connection over fear, you will find that what you thought was lost can be reborn, not in the same form as before, but in a wiser, richer, more meaningful way. In that version of attraction, the one grounded in truth, vulnerability, and vitality, is not only possible after 60, it is one of the greatest gifts this chapter of life has to offer. And all you have to do is accept it, claim it, and let it flow through everything you do, because you are still here, and you still have so much love to give and receive. And the world needs the fullness of who you are now more than ever.